I was thinking, I like to pair my clothing with interesting things. I was thinking,
Hey guys, welcome back to The Famous File. We all love a good underdog story, right? Those tales where someone starts from nothing, fights their way to the top, and they make it big. But, what happens when the fairy tale flips? What if the fame, the money, the parties, and the private jets aren't enough to keep the dream alive? Spoiler alert, it gets real messy. Today, we're talking about famous folks who, believe it or not, ended up homeless. Yep, you heard that right. These are people who went from red carpets to living out of cars, couches, or even the streets. We're diving into their childhood struggles, the moments they hit it big, the drama and scandals that shook their lives, and what caused their ultimate downfall. And trust me, some of these stories are wild. So grab your snacks, buckle up, and let's get into it. Bobby Driscoll. Who better to kick this off than the ultimate cautionary tale, Bobby Driscoll?
Where is that villain, Captain Hook? I'll slice him up and throw him to the crocodile.
I guess Bobby Driscoll was
The original Disney Golden Boy. If you don't know the name, you definitely know the face, or maybe even his voice. He was the child star of the 1940s and 50s, won an Academy Award, and even became the first kid to sign a big contract with Disney. Sounds like a dream, right? But this story takes a turn so sharp, you'll get whiplash. Bobby was a natural-born actor, discovered by pure chance at 5.5 years old in a barber shop in Altadena, California. At just 5 years old, Bobby was already booking roles, and by 9, he was stealing the spotlight in Song of the South. Bobby's talent was undeniable. He was convincing in everything he did, whether it was on the big screen or on TV, and his career spanned an impressive 17 years, from 1943 to 1960. He starred in some of the biggest movies of the time, like The Sullivans, 1944, Song of the South, 1946, So Dear to My Heart, 1948, and The Window, 1949. That last one wasn't just a hit, it was the sleeper of 1949, and it earned Bobby an Academy Award for Outstanding Juvenile Actor in 1950. By then, he wasn't just a child star, he was a bona fide Hollywood darling, and the hits kept coming. Bobby played Jim Hawkins in Disney's Treasure Island, 1950, which earned him a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1560 Vine Street. By 1954, he was so beloved that he won a Milky Way Gold Star Award in a nationwide poll for his work on TV and radio. Now, you'd think being Disney's poster child would set you up for life, right? Well, here's where the plot twist comes in. Bobby hit puberty, and severe acne started scarring his once adorable face, and suddenly he wasn't marketable anymore. At just 16, his acting career stalled. His voice wasn't smooth enough for voiceover work, and Disney, the studio that had made him a star, dropped him shortly after the release of Peter Pan, 1953, where, by the way, he not only voiced the iconic character but also served as the live-action model. Despite all this, Bobby kept trying. He continued acting on TV until 1957, even landing roles in The Scarlet Coat, 1955, and The Party Crashers, 1958. But Hollywood wasn't kind to damaged goods, and Bobby's life spiraled. He turned to drugs, leading to multiple run-ins with the law. By 1961, he was convicted as a drug addict and sent to rehab. When he was released in 1962, Bobby was eager to stage a comeback, but the industry had turned its back on him. His criminal record and reputation as a former addict made him untouchable. Hoping for a fresh start, he moved to New York to pursue theater work. But even there, his reputation had preceded him. No one would hire him. By the mid-1960s, Bobby had completely disappeared from the mainstream. His final known appearance was in the underground short film Dirt, 1965. He briefly found refuge in Andy Warhol's factory scene, but eventually faded into obscurity, broke and disillusioned. In March 1968, 2 children playing in an abandoned East Village tenement found his body. Unrecognized, unclaimed, and presumed homeless, he was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave on Hart Island. It wasn't until a year later that anyone realized the tragic figure was Bobby Driscoll, the boy who once was Peter Pan, forever dreaming of never growing up. Natasha Lyonne. Next up, let's talk about Natasha Lyonne, a Hollywood actress who went from being a quirky indie darling to nearly losing it all, and then somehow clawing her way back to the top.
Gosh, it's so hard to know when something is either 10 years or 2, isn't it?
Some movie stars like peace and quiet.
You might know Natasha from American Pie, or more recently, as the star of Orange is the New Black and Russian Doll. But before her big comeback, her life hit rock bottom in a major way. Let's rewind to the beginning. Like so many child actors, Natasha's career started early. Too early, if you ask her. She's been pretty open about her regrets, saying, "I didn't have the best parents. I don't think they're bad people, but putting your kid in the business at 6 years old? Kind of a wacky idea." Natasha has said that by 10, she was a jaded professional, and by 16, her youth was already over. She summed it up perfectly: "My goose was cooked." Despite the early burnout, Natasha was everywhere as a teen. She appeared in Dennis the Menace, 1993, Woody Allen's Everyone Says I Love You, 1996, and Krippendorf's Tribe, 1998. Then, in 1998, she snagged her first starring role in the cult favorite indie film Slums of Beverly Hills, which earned her rave reviews. Critics loved her raw, sarcastic edge, and it set the stage for even bigger roles. The very next year, Natasha went mainstream with American Pie. You remember her, right? She was the effortlessly cool Jessica, the girl who was way too smart for all the high school drama. The same year, she also starred in the beloved cult classic, But I'm a Cheerleader, where she played a cheerleader who comes to terms with her identity while at a hilariously twisted gay conversion camp. That role solidified her as a fan favorite, an indie queen with major mainstream appeal. In the early 2000s, Natasha kept working nonstop. She appeared in Scary Movie 2, 2001, Party Monster, 2003, Blade, Trinity, 2004, and dozens of indie films. From the outside, it seemed like everything was great. But behind the scenes, Natasha was struggling. The pressure of growing up too fast, combined with addiction issues, led to a total downward spiral. Natasha had multiple run-ins with the law, including arrests for DUI and some bizarre behavior. First off, Natasha got kicked out of her private Jewish high school for selling weed to her classmates. In December 2004, Natasha's landlord, actor Michael Rappaport, evicted her from her Gramercy Park apartment after neighbors complained about her wild partying. When she left, the place was trashed. Broken glass, piles of garbage. It was a total disaster. After the eviction, Natasha was reportedly homeless. Her dad claimed she still owned a co-op she could stay in, but things weren't exactly stable. And then came the health and legal troubles. Natasha was battling a heroin addiction, and by 2005, she hit rock bottom. She missed a court hearing, which led to a warrant for her arrest, and then she was hospitalized with severe health issues: hepatitis C, a collapsed lung, and a heart infection. At this point, most people thought her career, and maybe even her life, was over. But here's where Natasha's story takes a turn. In 2006, she turned herself in and entered court-ordered rehab. And this time, it worked. She got clean, stayed clean, and decided it was time to rebuild her life. She's been sober ever since. Her comeback started with small roles here and there. But the game changer was landing Nikki Nichols in Orange Is the New Black. That role wasn't just a performance. It was Natasha channeling everything she'd been through into something real and unforgettable. Fans and critics loved her, and then she leveled up even further by co-creating Russian Doll, which became a massive hit and cemented her as one of Hollywood's most creative forces. Today, Natasha Lyonne is thriving. She's not just an actress, she's a survivor, a creator, and proof that no matter how far you fall, a comeback is always possible. Brett Butler. If you were watching TV in the 90s, you definitely remember Brett Butler as Grace Kelly. No, not the princess.
You pray for her, had wonderful bosses, terrific people to work with.
This is Grace Under Fire we're talking about.
Grace Under Fire
we all
in
remember
'93.
The sassy single mom in the hit sitcom Grace Under Fire. The show was a massive success, with Brett's sharp wit and relatable humor making her a household name. It even earned her a Golden Globe nomination, and at its peak, she was pulling in $250,000 per episode. So when did things go wrong? We have to go back to the beginning. Brett Butler was born Brett Anderson on January 30th, 1958, in Montgomery, Alabama, the eldest of 5 sisters. Her father was an abusive alcoholic, and that cycle of violence shaped much of her early life. Life wasn't easy for Brett growing up, but she channeled her tough upbringing into comedy. Before breaking into showbiz, she worked as a cocktail waitress while honing her stand-up skills. Her big break came in 1987 when Dolly Parton hired her as a writer for Dolly, a short-lived variety show. While the series didn't last, it put Brett on Hollywood's radar, and in 1993, her career skyrocketed when she landed the title role in the hit ABC sitcom Grace Under Fire. The show was a smash hit, Audiences loved Brett's wit and her portrayal of Grace Kelly, a tough-as-nails single mom trying to make ends meet. For 5 seasons, Brett was the queen of primetime TV. But fame came with a price. Behind the scenes, Brett was battling a drug addiction that made life and work chaotic. By 1996, she'd checked into rehab, but the issues persisted. In her 1996 memoir, Knee Deep in Paradise, Brett opened up about her struggles with addiction and the challenges of her personal life. In 1998, things hit a breaking point. Brett's erratic behavior on set led to her being dismissed from Grace Under Fire, and the show was canceled shortly after. After the show's cancellation, Brett moved to a farm in Georgia, where she tried to rebuild her life. She lived with 15 pets and focused on finding peace, but money troubles and depression made the road to recovery rocky. By 2011, her financial situation had become so dire that she ended up in a homeless shelter. In interviews, Brett has been candid about her struggles, saying that addiction and poor financial decisions left her with nothing. But she also never gave up. In 2011, she revealed on The Rosie Show that she'd been sober since 1998 and was working on making a comeback. Brett slowly made her way back to Hollywood, taking on small but memorable roles. In 2012, she appeared on The Young and the Restless, and later had a recurring role on Anger Management with Charlie Sheen. Today, Brett Butler is a survivor. She's not the sitcom star she once was, but she's still standing, still performing, and still sharing her story. Willie Ames. If you grew up in the 70s or 80s, Willie Ames was the guy. Born on July 15, 1960 in Newport Beach, California, Willie started acting at just 11 years old.
For her spontaneity, let's call it that, I think that's...
Before Willie was charming us as Tommy Bradford on 8 is Enough, he was cutting his teeth in some big-name productions. In 1972, he voiced Jamie Boyle in the animated series Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. A year later, he played a 12-year-old Benjamin Franklin in the CBS miniseries Benjamin Franklin. He even appeared in the classic miniseries Rich Man, Poor Man Book 2. And let's not forget his time on Gunsmoke and The Edge of Night. This guy was everywhere. In the late 70s and early 80s, Willie took the big screen by storm with movies like Scavenger Hunt and Paradise. Then came Zapped, a raunchy teen comedy that's still a cult favorite. And if you're a 90s kid, you probably remember him donning a superhero suit as the Christian Crusader Bible Man, starring in a video series and annual live performances that became a hit in faith-based entertainment. Willie didn't stop there. He hosted the ABC game show The Krypton Factor in 1990, starred in Hallmark's Harvest Moon in 2015, and even popped up in Dickie Roberts, former child star alongside David Spade. At his peak, Willie was a millionaire, with a platinum-selling career that included writing, producing, and directing. But fame didn't last. But behind the glossy TV smile, things weren't so perfect. Willie struggled to manage his sudden wealth and fame. By the time his acting roles began to dry up, he'd developed an addiction to drugs and alcohol, burning through his fortune in the process. In the early 2000s, Willie hit rock bottom. Divorced, broke, and estranged from his children, he found himself homeless, sleeping under bushes and in parking garages. In interviews, he's described the experience as humiliating, saying, "I went from celebrity to nobody." But here's where things take a turn. Willie eventually found solace in faith and took control of his life. He worked odd jobs, including as a cruise ship director, to get back on his feet. In 2009, Willie released an autobiography, Grace is Enough, where he detailed his struggles and redemption. After a 5-year hiatus where he worked as a cruise director and traveled to over 127 countries, Willie returned to acting and filmmaking. Today, he splits his time between Los Angeles and Vancouver with his third wife, Winnie Hung, and continues to prove that reinvention is always possible. Rocky Lockridge. Rocky Lockridge wasn't just any boxer. He was a legend in the ring. A 2-time world boxing champion, Rocky's career was defined by his tenacity, powerful punches, and the respect he earned as one of the sport's greats. But like so many who achieve the pinnacle of success, his life outside the ring was a very different story. Rocky was born on January 10, 1959, in Tacoma, Washington. He showed an early aptitude for boxing, quickly rising through the ranks as a fierce competitor. By the time he turned professional in the late 1970s, his name was already on the radar of the boxing world. Over his career, he notched a record of 44 wins, 36 by knockout. His ferocity in the ring and precision punches made him a formidable opponent. One of his most famous fights? It came in 1980 when Lockridge shocked the boxing world by knocking out the undefeated champion Roger Mayweather in the first round. The victory secured him the WBA super featherweight title, and it was a moment that cemented his place in boxing history. But while his star was rising in the ring, trouble was brewing outside of it. Despite his accolades and success, Rocky struggled with the pressures that came with fame. The money, the lifestyle, and the expectations became overwhelming. In an interview with Todd Schmerler for the Star-Ledger, he opened up about his 20-year battle with drug addiction. After each fight, he would party hard, describing it as 2 weekends of cocaine binges and whatever alcohol was on hand. Over time, the lifestyle took its toll, and his career began to crumble. By the time Rocky was 50 years old, he had been living on the streets of Camden, New Jersey for a decade. A far cry from his glory days in packed arenas, Rocky became a shadow of the champion he once was. He described the devastating impact of a stroke he suffered 3 years prior, which left him walking with a tilt, his body visibly weakened. Despite everything, Rocky found a way to keep fighting. His emotional appearance on Intervention in 2009 became a viral moment, but for Rocky, it was an opportunity for redemption. His family's love and determination gave him the push he needed to seek help, marking the start of his recovery. Lockridge's story is a powerful reminder of how far someone can fall, even from the highest heights, and how the strength to rise again can come from within. Though he passed away in 2019, Rocky Lockridge will always be remembered not only as a champion in the ring, but also as a fighter in life. Aaron Carter. Aaron Carter was the ultimate teen pop sensation of the early 2000s. From topping the charts to performing sold-out tours, he seemed to have it all: a multi-platinum career, legions of fans, and a life most kids could only dream of.
Concerned because you admitted on the tape piece that you say I haven't always been safe sexually.
Absolutely no, and that's a fact. I haven't always.
But behind the music, Aaron's life was anything but sweet. Born on December 7, 1987, Aaron Charles Carter grew up in the shadow of his famous brother, Nick Carter, but quickly carved out his own space in the spotlight. By the time he was 9 years old, Aaron had already released his debut album, which went platinum. His second album, Aaron's Party, Come Get It, turned him into a global phenomenon, with hit songs, TV appearances, and even an opening spot on Britney Spears' tour. But fame at such a young age came with a price. While Aaron was raking in millions, he later claimed he was being exploited financially. By the time he turned 18, his parents had squandered much of his fortune, leaving him saddled with tax debt and lawsuits. Aaron filed for bankruptcy in 2013, listing more than $3.5 million in debt. From there, things only got harder. Aaron's life spiraled into a series of legal troubles, public feuds, and addiction struggles. He frequently made headlines for erratic behavior and family disputes, including a restraining order filed by his brother Nick. He openly discussed his struggles with mental health, substance abuse, and his attempts at recovery. In one of his most vulnerable moments, Aaron admitted, "I never had a chance to grow up normally. I've always been Aaron Carter, the entertainer. That's all I knew how to be." He battled with addiction for years, checking in and out of rehab facilities while trying to rebuild his career through music and reality TV. At his lowest points, Aaron faced homelessness. He revealed in a 2019 interview that he was living paycheck to paycheck and had struggled to find stability. His face tattoos and social media rants became symbols of a life that was unraveling in real time. Despite brief moments of clarity and attempts at comebacks, Aaron's struggles ultimately overshadowed his talent. On November 5, 2022, Aaron Carter was found dead at the age of 34 in his California home. It was a heartbreaking end to a life that had burned so brightly, so young. His story is a sobering reminder of the cost of fame and the importance of compassion for those fighting their own battles. Margot Kidder. Margot Kidder will forever be remembered as Lois Lane, the whip-smart journalist and Superman's love interest in the blockbuster films of the late 70s and 80s. She was the face of a generation, a Hollywood starlet who soared to fame opposite Christopher Reeve.
I would hope there'd be more to it than that.
Because she's a bit of a dumb bunny, isn't she?
No, she's not at all.
Oh, come on.
No.
But Margot's life behind the cameras was a far cry from the superhero world she brought to life on screen. Born on October 17, 1948, in Yellowknife, Canada, Margot Kidder was a star on the rise, with natural charm and wit that made her a household name. After gaining attention in smaller films, she rocketed to international stardom with Superman in 1978, followed by 3 successful sequels. Hollywood loved her spunky, no-nonsense portrayal of Lois Lane, and she became one of the most recognizable actresses of her time. But fame wasn't enough to shield Margot from her personal demons. She battled bipolar disorder, a condition that often left her struggling to find stability. In the 90s, her mental health deteriorated, and she refused treatment, believing she could manage it on her own. Sadly, this decision led to one of the darkest periods of her life. In 1996, Margot disappeared for several days, sparking widespread concern. When she was found, the once glamorous star was unrecognizable. She had been sleeping in cardboard boxes in backyards in Los Angeles. Reports revealed she had lost her front teeth, her hair had been hacked off, and she was in a deeply distressed state. Margot later referred to the incident as a breakdown, saying, "I was screaming for help in the only way I knew how." She eventually sought treatment and became a vocal advocate for mental health awareness, using her platform to destigmatize discussions around bipolar disorder. She found peace in her later years, dedicating her time to environmental activism and continuing to act in smaller roles. But her life ended tragically on May 13, 2018, when she passed away at the age of 69. Her death was later ruled a suicide, a heartbreaking end to a life that had inspired so many. Nicolas Cage. When you think of Nicolas Cage, you think of intensity, eccentricity, and of course, a blockbuster career that has spanned decades.
I was thinking, I like to pair my clothing with interesting things. I was thinking,
From national treasure to ghostwriter, Cage has been a staple of Hollywood, taking on roles that made us laugh, cry, and cheer. At the height of his career, Cage was raking in serious cash, $40 million in 2009 alone. With a net worth once exceeding $100 million, the man didn't just spend money, he spent it with flair. Cage reportedly owned 15 homes, including a haunted mansion in New Orleans and 2 European castles. He also bought a burial tomb shaped like a pyramid, shrunken pygmy heads, and other rare artifacts that could easily rival the treasures in his National Treasure films. But in 2012, the party came to a screeching halt. The IRS slapped Cage with liens for more than $6 million in unpaid 2007 taxes. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. He reportedly owed a total of $13 million for back taxes across multiple years. According to Cage, his financial downfall wasn't just about his spending habits. He blamed his former business manager for leading him to ruin. To claw his way back to solvency, Cage had to sell off some of his most prized possessions, including homes and rare collectibles. From owning castles to couch surfing on the brink of financial collapse, the journey was a stark contrast to the wealth and power he often portrayed on screen. But if there's one thing Nicolas Cage is known for, besides, buying a dinosaur skull, it's his relentless work ethic. He didn't just sit back and let the debt consume him. Instead, Cage became one of the hardest working actors in Hollywood, taking on every role he could to rebuild his fortune. And it worked. While his net worth today stands at a more modest $25 million, Cage continues to act, direct, and remain a beloved figure in pop culture. Did any of these stories surprise you? Do you think they deserved what happened, or did life just hit them too hard? Let me know in the comments. And hey, if you know any other famous people who hit rock bottom, drop their names below. As always, if you enjoyed this trip down the fame and misfortune rabbit hole, give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you don't miss out on more juicy stories. We've got plenty coming your way on The Famous File. Until next time.